Welcome back to Deep Dive Stoic. In today's episode, we're gonna dive into something, well, kind of dark, really. We're gonna be looking at how to spot the signs that someone in your life might have a bit of an evil side.
Yeah, and we'll be looking at it through that Stoic lens, so we can figure out how to deal with these people, these interactions.
Yeah, protect ourselves.
Because let's be honest, there are people out there who actually enjoy causing harm, enjoy seeing things fall apart.
It's a tough thing to accept, but yeah, some folks just thrive on that negativity, on chaos. And the really tricky part is that they can be so good at hiding it.
Oh, absolutely. They can put on this mask of charm and charisma, make you feel like you can trust them. And then, bam, they hit you with that negativity.
Exactly. So from a Stoic perspective, it's all about recognizing that not everyone is coming from a place of virtue. Some people, they're really good at hiding their true intentions.
So this deep dive, this is all about giving you the tools, the Stoic tools to see through that, right? Yeah. To help you spot these toxic traits. Exactly. We're going to lay out what we call the 5 telltale signs of an evil person. A bit dramatic maybe, but it gets the point across.
Yeah, I like it. It's all about protecting yourself, your mental health, your well-being. All right, let's jump into sign number 1. Superficial charm and charisma masking self-centeredness.
Right. So think about those people you meet, and they light up the room. They're witty, charming. They seem so interested in you.
Yeah, they just draw you in, make you feel like you're the most important person in the world, at least at first.
And that's the key, because often what's happening is they're mirroring you. They're feeding you these subtle compliments, playing to that human need to feel connected, validated.
But the Stoics, they'd warn us about that, wouldn't they? About getting caught up in that external validation.
Oh, for sure. They'd say, look deeper, Observe, use your reason, don't be swayed by appearances, because over time, you'll start to see those cracks in the facade.
Like what? What are some things we should look out for?
Well, that constant need to be the center of attention, right?
Yeah.
Dominating conversations, always bringing it back to themselves.
Right. Or always trying to one-up you, overshadowing your stories, your accomplishments.
Yeah. And they might do it in this, really subtle way, still maintaining that charm for the rest of the group, but you feel it.
So it's not just about being extroverted, right? There's a line there.
Absolutely. It's a red flag when it's constant, when it's always about them. And when you think about it from a Stoic perspective, it's like, well, they're lacking that consideration for others.
Right, that lack of respect for other people, for their inherent worth, which, if I remember correctly, is pretty central to Stoic thought.
Absolutely.
Right.
So let me paint you a picture. You're at a party, and this person, they're telling these amazing stories. Everyone's laughing. And at first, you're captivated.
Yeah, but then you realize they haven't asked you a single question about yourself.
Exactly. And every time you try to share something, they find a way to bring the focus back to them.
So how do we deal with that? How do we see through it?
Well, the Stoics talk about apatheia, which is this state of not being ruled by your emotions, but rather using reason to observe. So in this situation, you'd use that to step back.
See the situation clearly without getting caught up in their charm, right?
Exactly. Observe without judgment. And that's when you really see that self-centeredness.
And it's also interesting to see how they react when things don't go their way, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because someone with genuine character, someone living by Stoic virtue, they'll deal with disappointments gracefully.
Right. But these evil types, they might lash out.
Get defensive, angry, even manipulative, Anything to regain control, to get back in the spotlight.
Which reminds me of, wasn't Marcus Aurelius always warning about anger and manipulation? Seeing those as deviations from virtuous behavior.
Exactly. So yeah, pay attention to those shifts, those moments when the charm drops.
It's all about observation, taking the time to really see someone's actions.
Right. And trusting your instincts too. Didn't Epictetus say something about carefully examining the character of those we choose to associate with?
Yeah, he did. So if someone's charm seems a bit too much, a bit too constant, maybe take a step back.
Exactly. See how they treat people they perceive as less important, or when they think no one's watching. That's when their true character shines through.
And it's important to remember, not all charming people are bad, right?
Of course not. But that consistent pattern of self-centeredness behind the charm, that's a big red flag.
So cultivate that mindfulness, use that Stoic wisdom, and you'll be able to navigate those interactions a bit safer.
That brings us to our second sign. Lack of empathy and disregard for others' feelings. Empathy, that ability to understand and share the feelings of another, it's crucial for human connection.
For building meaningful relationships, for treating each other with kindness and consideration, absolutely.
And, from a Stoic perspective, it's all about recognizing that shared humanity. We're all connected. We all have worth. Marcus Aurelius talked a lot about that, about our duty to one another.
Right. So when someone just doesn't have that empathy, it goes against those Stoic ideals.
For sure. And it can be so hurtful. Imagine you confide in a friend, you share something vulnerable, something that's really bothering you.
Yeah.
And they don't care.
Or worse, they laugh it off, tell you you're being too sensitive.
Exactly. They don't validate your experience. They don't offer support. And it's not just about negative emotions either. They might not be able to share in your joys either.
Yeah, like when you achieve something you're really proud of and they're just indifferent.
Or they find a way to downplay it.
Yeah.
Make it about them somehow. And it's not just in personal relationships. It can happen in the workplace too.
Like that boss who just piles on the work, expects you to be available 24/7, ignores requests for time off. They just don't care about the impact on their employees.
Right. And in those situations, the Stoics would say, focus on what you can control.
Yeah.
You can't force empathy in others, but you can choose how you respond.
You can choose to protect your own emotional well-being.
Exactly. Because their lack of empathy, it's a reflection of their character, not yours.
And a lack of empathy, that can be a really slippery slope, can it? It can lead to some seriously harmful behavior.
Oh, absolutely. If you can't connect with the feelings of others, it becomes easier to lie, to cheat, to steal, even to hurt people physically, because you don't register that pain.
Seneca talked a lot about kindness and justice, didn't he? He saw those as expressions of inner virtue. So a lack of empathy, that's like the opposite of that.
For sure. And, it doesn't always have to be these huge, dramatic actions. It can be those small, everyday things, too.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, constantly interrupting people, not really listening to what they're saying, not offering help when it's clearly needed, making insensitive comments and not even realizing it.
Right. And those little things, they add up. They paint a picture of someone who's just not tuned in to the people around them.
And the Stoics, they were all about being observant, about picking up on those patterns.
So what do we do if we're dealing with someone who just doesn't seem to have empathy?
Boundaries, my friend. Boundaries. You got to protect yourself, your mental and emotional health.
The Stoics would agree with that, wouldn't they? They'd say, why put yourself in a position where you're constantly being hurt?
Absolutely. And that brings us to our third sign, which is, it's a bit of a heavy one. Manipulation and deceitful tactics for control.
Manipulation. It's so sneaky, so insidious. You often don't even realize it's happening until you're feeling totally confused and powerless.
Right. It's like they're pulling strings and you're just a puppet. And the worst part is they can be so good at making you doubt yourself.
Yeah, you start to question your own perceptions, your memories. It's like they're warping reality around you. And the Stoics, they'd be all over this, wouldn't they?
Oh, totally. Because manipulation, it goes against everything they stood for. Yeah. Honesty, integrity, clear thinking. It's all about clouding the truth, distorting your understanding of what's real.
And one of the most damaging forms of manipulation, it got to be gaslighting.
Oh, for sure. That's where they try to make you believe you're crazy. They deny things that happen, twist your words, tell you you're imagining things.
It's like you confront them about something hurtful they did, and suddenly you're the one who's overreacting. You're the one who's misremembering.
Exactly. It's maddening. And then there's the playing the victim tactic.
Oh, yeah, the guilt trip. They're always the one who's been wronged. Always the one who needs rescuing.
And it's never ending. They'll constantly complain about their problems, but never actually do anything to solve them.
Right. And they make you feel like it's your responsibility to fix everything. And, this whole manipulation thing, it really ties into what Epictetus said about focusing on what we can control.
Absolutely. Because manipulators, they try to blur those lines, make you feel responsible for their emotions, their choices.
And don't forget about the flattery, the fake charm.
Oh yeah, the classic love bombing tactic. They shower you with praise, compliments, maybe even gifts.
But it's all just a way to get something from you, right?
Exactly. There are always strings attached.
Yeah.
And the Stoics would say, remember, true self-worth comes from within. Don't let your ego get inflated by someone else's insincere praise.
And another big red flag, I think, is isolation.
Oh, for sure. They'll start criticizing your friends, your family, anyone who might offer you a different perspective.
Trying to make you doubt those relationships, make you dependent on them.
Right. And the Stoics, they really valued community, those strong, supportive connections. So anyone who tries to isolate you, that's a big warning sign.
And then there's financial manipulation.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Borrowing money and never paying it back. controlling your access to finances.
Making you feel like you can't make your own decisions about money.
And they might justify it by saying, oh, you're not good with money, or I'm just trying to help you. But really, it's about control.
And the Stoics, they were all about self-sufficiency, weren't they? Being responsible for your own life, your own finances.
Exactly. So if you're starting to feel manipulated, take a step back, look at the patterns. Trust your gut.
Are you always the one giving, the one compromising? Are you constantly feeling confused, guilty?
Those are all signs. And the most important thing is to set boundaries.
Stand up for yourself, communicate your needs clearly.
And remember, you can't control what they do, but you can control how you respond.
Which brings us to our fourth sign of an evil person, controlling behavior and undermining autonomy.
Yeah, this one goes beyond just having preferences. This is about needing to dominate, to dictate every aspect of someone else's life.
It often comes disguised as care, as concern, but really it's about power. And the Stoics, they were all about freedom, weren't they? Personal freedom, self-control.
Absolutely. They'd see this controlling behavior as like a fundamental violation of someone's right to choose their own path.
So how does this controlling behavior manifest? What should we be looking out for?
Well, it can be subtle, like always having to choose the restaurant, the movie, the activity. And if you object, they say, oh, but I know you better.
Right. Or in relationships, it can be even more intense, checking your phone, demanding to know your passwords.
Yeah, needing constant updates on where you are, who you're with, dictating who you can be friends with.
And it all comes down to that need to control, to have the upper hand. And, it makes me think of what Epictetus said about inner freedom.
That no matter what's happening around us, we always have the freedom to choose our response.
And controlling behavior, it tries to take that away from you.
Exactly. It wants to dictate your thoughts, your feelings, your actions.
And another aspect of this is financial control.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah.
Managing all the money, giving you an allowance, making you justify every purchase.
It's another way to limit your independence, to make you reliant on them.
And they might say, oh, I'm just trying to be responsible, or you're not good with money. But it's about power.
And the Stoics would encourage us to be self-sufficient, right? To manage our own affairs, to not be financially dependent on someone who might use that against us.
Exactly. And we talked about isolation before, how manipulators use it. Well, controlling people do the same thing.
Yeah, they'll criticize your friends, your family, anyone who might challenge their control over you.
Trying to make you believe that they're the only one you can trust, the only one who truly cares about you.
And the Stoics, they knew how important it was to have that strong support network.
Absolutely. Community, connection, that's essential for human flourishing.
And in more extreme cases, controlling behavior can even involve threats.
Oh yeah, that's when it gets really scary. Threats to leave you, to hurt themselves, even to hurt you if you don't comply with their demands.
And Seneca, he'd say, face your fears, don't give in to intimidation, reclaim your power.
Exactly. Because that's what controlling behavior is all about. Taking away your power, your autonomy.
So how do we deal with this? How do we resist that control?
First, you got to recognize it. See the patterns.
Yeah.
And then set those boundaries.
Communicate your needs clearly, assert your independence, and don't be afraid to seek support.
Because you deserve to be free. You deserve to make your own choices.
All right, on to our fifth and final sign. Pathological lying and fabricating reality.
And this is different from the occasional white lie, right?
Yeah.
This is constant, persistent deception, like lying for no reason.
They just invent stories, twist facts, create this whole alternate reality, and it makes it impossible to trust them, to build a real connection.
And the Stoics were all about truth, about living in accordance with nature. Marcus Aurelius, he talked about that a lot.
So this pathological lying, it goes against that, doesn't it? It's like they're creating this false world.
Exactly. They're not grounded in reality. And it can show up in so many ways.
Like they might exaggerate their achievements, take credit for other people's work, make up these elaborate stories about their past.
Yeah, and in the workplace, it can be really damaging. Lying about their qualifications, sabotaging colleagues, spreading rumors.
And the Stoics would say, stay true to yourself, to your own integrity, don't get sucked into that web of deceit.
Right. Because it can be contagious, You start to question everything, everyone.
Especially in personal relationships. Imagine constantly wondering if your partner, your friend, is being truthful. It creates so much insecurity, so much doubt.
It's exhausting. And the Stoics, they'd tell us to trust our judgment. But that's hard when you're dealing with a pathological liar.
Because they can be so convincing, right? They tell their lies with such confidence, such detail.
It's like they believe their own lies.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to be vigilant, to observe carefully, to not take everything at face value.
Pay attention to how they react when you challenge them, when you point out inconsistencies.
Do they get defensive? Do they blame you? Or do they come up with even more elaborate, even more unbelievable explanations?
Because someone who's genuine, they'll own up to their mistakes, they'll try to make things right.
But a pathological liar, they just dig themselves deeper into that hole.
And that kind of lying, it just destroys trust. It makes it impossible to have a healthy, authentic relationship.
The Stoics, they believed in building relationships based on honesty, on mutual respect. And with a pathological liar, that foundation just doesn't exist.
So you have to ask yourself, is it even possible to rebuild that trust? Or are you better off walking away, protecting your own well-being?
It's a tough choice. But sometimes the most stoic thing you can do is to prioritize your own peace of mind.
And that brings us to a really important point, which is setting boundaries. Because whether you're dealing with charm, masking self-centeredness, lack of empathy, manipulation, controlling behavior, or pathological lying, boundaries are crucial.
They're like those lines in the sand, They define what's acceptable and unacceptable in your relationships.
And they're not about being mean or controlling. It's about self-respect. About protecting your own well-being, your own inner peace.
And the Stoics, they were all about that, weren't they? About taking care of yourself, about living in accordance with virtue.
So when you set a boundary, you got to be clear, you got to be assertive.
Yeah, like let's say someone's always interrupting you. You can say, hey, I need to be able to finish my thought without being interrupted. If it keeps happening, I'm going to have to end the conversation.
And the key is to be consistent. Because if you don't enforce those boundaries, people won't take them seriously.
Right, it's like that Stoic discipline, Doing what you say you're going to do, sticking to your principles.
And when those boundaries are respected, it can really improve your relationships.
Yeah, because it creates that mutual understanding, that respect. But you got to be prepared for pushback.
Especially from those people who are used to getting their own way, who are used to disregarding the needs of others.
But in those moments, remember what the Stoics would say. Stay calm, focus on what you can control, which is your own response.
And sometimes setting boundaries might mean making really tough decisions.
Yeah, like limiting contact with someone, maybe even ending a relationship.
But as hard as that is, sometimes it's necessary to protect yourself, to protect your own well-being.
And remember, you are not alone. The Stoics, they believed in community, in supporting each other. So reach out to people you trust, people who can offer guidance and encouragement.
And take care of yourself. Because as the Stoics taught us, true strength comes from within.
It's about knowing your worth, setting those boundaries, and living in accordance with your values.
Thank you all for being a part of this podcast with us. If this episode helped you slow down and reflect, support Deep Dive Stoic. Like, subscribe, and pass it on. See you next time.